Newsweek byline features a way to beat high electricity costs, especially if you live on a hill and you have a river flowing swiftly through your property.
Barbara and George Mallett are pioneers of the 80s, and the new frontier they're forging is energy independence. With their sweat and toil and a perfect mountain site in Northern California, they've put together the Mom and Pop Utility Company, a small hydroelectric plant that generates enough electricity to fuel 220 homes. Aside from the fact that it's a money-making business, a major utility buys the Mallet's kilowatts for its main power line, it's also a step toward cheaper energy.
It begins the driving of rates down. There's a direct connection between what I'm doing and the ratepayer, in that the more of these renewable resources are put online, the less utilities have to pay for capital constructions, and the less the ratepayer will pay for his electricity in his home over the long haul.
The Mallets bought their property with a small generator already in place, but it's the long drop down their mountainside, 569 feet, that gives the mountain water runoff the power to generate electricity. It's a crude, handmade system of covered trenches, pipes for both irrigation and power, and traps to keep debris out of the cascading waters. The water used for power is recycled back into a nearby lake. After the initial equipment investment, it only takes family maintenance to produce 325 kilowatts per hour of clean, non-fossil energy. For their next project, the Mallets have organized the Small Power Producers Association. So far, there are 80 members who want to follow the Mallets' lead and start their own energy plants. In Trinity County, I'm Marilee Beck.
There must not be any environmentalists in that area. Say, did you hear the price of fish may be coming down? Well, it's due to deregulation. Of course, they said that was going to happen in the airline business too, didn't they?
69 for the ball. 69 for the ball.
Each day at the Boston Fish Exchange, thousands of pounds of fish are sold, often setting fish prices throughout most of the country. In the past, fishermen were restricted to how much fish could be caught each day. Now those catch quotas have been lifted in George's Bank, and the price of fish should drop.
You'll see those prices drop to a place where the housewife will be able to buy it at least a third cheaper than what she's paying for fish right now.
Paul Henley owns a boat which costs him $5,000 every time it leaves the dock. Although he brings in nearly 50,000 pounds of fish every week, it's a small amount when compared to the larger boats. Without the quotas to restrict large boats, Henley is not sure he'll survive.
Definitely going to affect us because, like I said, the mortgage rates on the boat, they have a $500,000 boat. It's financially impossible to maintain at 40, 35, 25-cent fish.
Catch quotas were enacted in the area in 1977 to preserve the almost depleted stock of certain fish. The federal government lifted the quota this month in an effort to fill the growing gap between consumer demand and the supply of fish. Elizabeth Kushner reporting.
Seems like there's something fishy about that whole deal, doesn't it? It seems the old ways of doing things are taking the second trip around. Now, have you ever heard of ram dirt construction? It's also called lost dirt method. It caught on briefly in the 1930s and 40s as a way to construct buildings.
The idea is not all that new. Ram dirt construction, or compacting soil to form walls, caught on briefly in the 1930s and 1940s. But then the technique faded away until now. In St. David, Arizona, there's a new development of ram dirt homes and a church. And in neighboring Sierra Vista, the first commercial ram dirt building is under construction, a 2-story bank. Although builders prefer a soil mix of 70% sand and 30% clay or silt, often dirt from the construction site is used. The soil is dampened and then shoveled into forms, where it is tamped. The packing process is repeated over every 4 inches of fill. The result, a 2-foot thick wall that builders claim is as strong or stronger than a conventional wall. And it is an energy-efficient wall, one that absorbs and stores hot and cold air, an important cost consideration for banker Ed Zuckerman.
The savings comes over a period of years through, as I said before, our energy savings. The actual construction is more expensive using rammed earth, but less expensive to operate and to maintain as the years go by.
After curing for a week or two, the rough dirt is plastered or stuccoed and then painted. The advantages seem to be threefold. It is an inexpensive material. The finished product is energy efficient. And the technique is not limited to the dry Southwest. Builders claimed ram dirt will work anywhere. In Sierra Vista, Arizona, I'm Lynn Ketchum.
I wonder if ram dirt building would withstand a typical Northwest soaker. Or, of course, there's possibilities. You could have a wall garden or artistically angleworms coming out of the... I don't know. This is Newsweek. Byline, I'm Gene Brendler. Newsweek Byline brings you the happy news, and we are indeed happy to report that finally they have found a use for the pigeon. Long considered a public nuisance, the lowly pigeon turns out to be an expert at spotting people lost at sea or in the desert. Their field of vision permits them to pick up the slightest color contrast even better than the human eye.
It's called Project Sea Hunt. Trained pigeons are mounted into special carriers placed under Coast Guard search and rescue helicopters and used to help find missing people or objects. But why pigeons? Project Director Lieutenant Ray Miller explains.
Well, we've learned certainly that pigeons have eyesight that makes them ideal for searching for objects at sea. And tests have shown that their capability to focus on a wide range of the horizon and also their excellent color vision lends them very well to these searches. In fact, they performed better than human crewmen have under the same search circumstances. That was part of the actual testing that we conducted.
The idea of using pigeons in search and rescue operations first came to scientists at Hawaii's Naval Ocean Systems Center. Since April, the San Francisco Coast Guard has been testing it.
When one of the pigeons mounted in the search compartment underneath the helicopter makes a sighting of a red, yellow, or orange object on the sea, he begins pecking on a key in front of him, and that key sends an electronic impulse up to this device held by the crewman in the cabin.
Jim Simmons, a scientist credited with the idea, sees other ways the birds can be used.
A similar system could be used, say, if you were looking for somebody in the snow or somebody in the desert, situations where you have or have the opportunity of having high visual contrast.
It should be pointed out that all boaters or seagoing vessels are required to carry rescue devices colored red, yellow, or orange. Also the colors pigeons can most easily spot against blue water.
It looks like pigeons may finally get some respect, and with good reason. They train easily and have a lifespan of more than 10 years. They also have a better visual capacity than pilots. Now, by the end of this year, the project will be evaluated and then probably expanded to other regions as well. I'm Janet Rhodes.
Yeah, I told you it was happy news. Maybe now we can stop poisoning them since this new discovery. More and more, we're learning that birds and animals, even reptiles, are very important to our lives. Individually or the whole race, if you want to consider, and that's good. Let's jump now to Honolulu, Hawaii. Paradise to many, and we see that there are problems even in paradise. They have their own Iron Lady, just like Britain does, in the form of a mayor who's worried that Honolulu is going to be developed right out of being the tourists' paradise.
Honolulu, which is home to 80% of Hawaii's population, has borne the brunt of the state's problems in recent years. The city is fraught with congestion, high crime, and a cost of living so exorbitant it makes the low 6% unemployment rate deceptive. Tourism has fallen sharply due to a weak national economy, cutting deep into the city's major source of income. Trying hard to cure these ills is Mayor Eileen Anderson, who pulled off the state's biggest upset nearly 2 years ago by ousting a controversial three-term incumbent.
The public out there has become more and more aware of the fact that that they want their governments run more efficiently, more like a business.
And the former state nixed a costly mass transit system for being fiscally unsound and is pushing a cautious downtown development plan.
The people of Honolulu have come to realize that we have to be very careful in the future. That indeed these islands have finite resources, finite land, that they could be so developed that it would not be the pleasant place which it is.
Anderson's homey manner and conservative goals have even prompted such nicknames as Ma Perkins and the Iron Maiden. She actively supports other women candidates, but refuses to speculate on her own political future, which could include the 1986 governor's race. Like most big city mayors, Anderson is caught in a struggle to achieve her goals amidst the harsh realities of today's economy. But she believes her traditionalist, strictly business approach to government will work to unify the city's diverse population and bring back the spirit of aloha for both residents and visitors. From Honolulu, this is Sunday Smith.
Miss Smith, you had a good assignment on that one. But with most people preferring the other islands now, our Iron Lady already may be too late. But good luck to her. It seems now that the simple aspirin tablet is once again under attack, this time in connection with Rhyes syndrome, and some researchers feel that in some people a reaction can take place that makes them susceptible.
She is today a playful, energetic child, but just 2 years ago, Shannon Cooney lay comatose for 2 days, clinging to her life. She was the rare victim of a mysterious disease called Rhyes syndrome. The sudden attack followed an ordinary case of the chickenpox, during which her mom had given her aspirin.
She became very sleepy, and that's all she would do is sleep, and only to wake up to vomit. This went on for like a day, and the doctors kept saying it was just a flu with the chickenpox. And then all of a sudden she became very hostile. She took a seizure on me and a convulsion, and we rushed to the hospital.
A disease whose cause is unknown, Rhyes swells up the liver and the brain. Shannon came through it, but now, 2 years later, medical experts say there's a good chance the aspirin is what brought it on.
There appears to be, depending upon the study and how you perform your analysis, anywhere from roughly a 3-fold to a 13-fold increase in the risk of Rhyes syndrome given aspirin consumption.
But the aspirin industry calls such findings premature.
To my way of looking at it as a scientist, I think the disaster is running off without adequate information. Here's a product that's been around for 80 years. Where has Rhyes syndrome been all that time?
And even Shannon's own mother is not convinced aspirin is to blame.
Already, because both of my children had chickenpox. Both of them got aspirin with chickenpox. One came down with rye, and one didn't come down with rye.
The verdict on aspirin won't be in for some time. Consumer groups want warning labels on bottles. The aspirin industry wants more studies. Until then, parents must decide for themselves. But even Fran Cooney admits there's been no aspirin in her house for 2 years. I'm Candace Kovner.
Well, obviously, much more research is needed, and with the millions who take aspirin for one reason or another, it would seem difficult to single out aspirin as the sole culprit. Well, we'll have to wait and see. You know, when times get tough, it seems gambling increases. For instance, horse racing seems to attract a lot of dollars. And like anything else, costs there are going up. Here's an inside look into the sport of quarter horse racing.
More than anything else, what makes a horse race is money, and that's precisely what draws breeders, owners, and racing fans to Ruidoso Downs, New Mexico, home of the world's richest horse races. Started as a bush track in the 1940s for local horse owners, today Ruidoso already hosts 3 separate million-dollar races for quarter horses and plans on more.
Our derbies are reaching $1 million now, and probably our other futurities are going to grow and will reach $1 million within 2 or 3 years. That doesn't mean first money, that's for the purse.
New Mexico is one of the poorer and least populated states in the U.S., so where does the more than $500,000 daily take of the track come from? Texas and Oklahoma oil money ventures here for a safe bet on some cooler summer weather and to contribute to the high-stakes purses through entry fees on their homegrown fillies.
Entry fees, it costs so much to put a horse in and then keep the payments up. It's running $3,000 per horse.
Labor Day will be the running of the richest horse race in the world, the All-American Futurity, with a winner's purse of $1 million for the one horse who, like Betty Grable, will walk away with a set of $1 million legs. In Ruidoso Downs, New Mexico, this is Tom Klein reporting.
Boy, $1 million purse, huh? But I wonder what kind of an investment that you'd have to make just to get a horse in that race. I bet the profit margin is very small. Our next story has to do with the recording star I remember because of a program that I used to do just a few years back. The program was called High Time, and I must have announced this star's name 20 or 30 times. Now, the rags to riches story has been told about many recording stars, but to have it done twice is a mark of someone who really believes in himself. His name, Bobby Vinton.
She wore blue.
Remember this face? He's been around a long time, turning out dozens of #1 hits like Roses Are Red and Blue Velvet. He was a superstar at age 21, whose popularity faded with time. But unlike so many other singers of his generation, he made a comeback 8 years ago with a Polish song called Melody of Love. And today, he remains one of Las Vegas's biggest attractions. But it wasn't always that way for Bobby Vinton.
I think a lot of people make the mistake of sitting back, waiting for something to happen with them. I mean, they blame their managers, they blame their press agents. What are you doing for me? What are you doing for me? And I learned a long time ago, because that's how I started. You have to do most of it yourself.
To walk the grounds of his home in Los Angeles, it's hard to imagine that Vinton has ever faced hard times. But the fact is, he's a classic rags to riches and back to rags and riches story. The all-American boy from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is a long way from home, but he's still a down-to-earth, optimistic person who constantly pursues show business. He's written a new book, started his own record company, will tour this summer, and even has another hit on the charts. Maybe he'll add another gold record to the 7 he has now. One thing is for certain, show business is an unpredictable roller coaster ride, but Bobby Vinton will never give it up.
It's a nice feeling to know that these people are there. They've seen you many times, they come back, and that you can make them happy. And I try to entertain people, I try to get them involved where everybody walks out feeling good.
Elizabeth Anderson reporting from Los Angeles.
Well, I can't say that he's my type of music man, but you have to give him credit just for surviving in that competitive world. Bobby Vinton. Well, you hear all about it on Newsweek Byline. Stay tuned.